It's the Growing for Market podcast.
If we're doing seed work in a more decentralized way and a more diverse way, then we have better resilience in case the company drops a variety or in case there's some other supply chain problem. And, we saw some supply chain problems in 2020. So yeah, just to get involved, to think about seed sourcing, to think about regional seed work, and to think about and ask about where the seed was produced and stewarded that you're growing. And I think that will help regional people be able to do regional seed work and to make that a viable income and viable project.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Andrew Mefford, your host and the editor of Growing for Market magazine for 34 years, the magazine for flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Are you tired of breakdowns and not knowing if your old Farmall or Alice G will start? Consider the Tillmor Super E, the electric cultivating tractor built for market growers. With up to 8 hours of runtime, the Super E uses a 48-volt electric system that's quiet, easy to operate, and dependable. You'll love the high clearance and clear view of your rows, perfect for cultivating, fertilizing, and planting with precision. And here's the best part. It starts at $19,500, and that includes one battery, charger, and everything you need to start using it right away. No gas, no noise, no constant repairs, and cheaper to operate than a gas tractor. It delivers reliable power that reduces manual labor and keeps your crew motivated. Learn more and see the Super E in action at tillmor.com.
Hey, it's Lindsay from Grown By. There are a lot of farm sales platforms out there, but there's only one that's cooperatively owned by farmers. And that's Grown By, your all-in-one solution to simplify farm sales. I'm proud and excited to share 2 new features now available on top of the tools you already know and love. Number 1, our customizable CSA box builder. It allows your customers to simply say what they'd like in their share, and Grown By matches their preferences with your weekly harvest. Number 2, our new wholesale-only marketplace. Developed with the Culinary Institute of America, it makes your life easier with a dedicated shop for your wholesale customers. No more texting those chefs, combining retail and wholesale inventories and records, and, drumroll, automatic payments on due dates. No more chasing down late payments. These new features sit alongside our popular online sales and traditional subscription CSA tools, making it easier than ever to manage your farm's business. As you start to get ready for next season, we'd love to hear from you and see if our cooperative can be a partner in growing your farm. Visit us at grownby.com. That's GROWNBY.com.
Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Edmund Frost to the Growing for Market podcast. Edmund leads Commonwealth Seed Growers, a small, farm-based seed company in Virginia with a commitment to regional seed production, adaptation, and research. He has also managed seed production and research at Twin Oaks Seed Farm in Central Virginia since 2008. So, without further ado, welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, Edmund.
Thanks, Andrew. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear about it because I feel like one of the most exciting trends in the seed world lately is having bringing regionally adapted seeds back. And so I am curious to hear about Commonwealth Seeds. First of all, how long has Commonwealth Seeds been around, and why did you decide to start a seed company?
So we actually started 11 years ago. It doesn't seem like it's been that long sometimes, but the reason we started was because at that time I was doing seed production already. I had been for 5 or 6 years, and I was really getting more and more interested in sort of regional selection and also trialing and starting to get into plant breeding. And I wanted to find a way that those values could be directly communicated to the seed buyers. Because when I was just doing seed production for other seed companies, a lot of that work and the information tied to the work wasn't getting through to the customers. So I was interested in kind of a more holistic seed system approach that would incorporate the trialing and the selection and the breeding and get that information communicated to the people who are going to be using the seeds.
Well, that's interesting. And I did notice when I was looking at your website that you put the actual farm that produced the seeds onto the packet so people know who actually grew their seeds. So I imagine that's an extension of that, because I don't think I've ever seen that particular feature from a seed company before. There may well be other people who do that. You may know better than I do, but I thought that was a pretty cool feature. You could see who grew your seeds.
Yeah, it's really important to us to have that transparency, because so many of the seeds people buy are produced far away or overseas, and most growers, farmers, and gardeners don't really know where the seed that they're getting is produced. Obviously, they know who they're buying it from, but they don't know a step further back than that. So we really wanted to just get it out there really clearly. We're growing all this, and here's exactly how it was grown, and you can make more informed choices that way. We did get, some of that idea. Turtle Tree Seeds does that, and Adaptive Seeds, Siskiyou Seeds. There are several projects that were doing that before us, but
okay, good to know. Well, actually, that question makes me wonder if you could explain how your seed company works to people, because I was looking on the website. Is it 8 or 9 farms that grow the seeds? And is it more like you have the same 8 or 9 farms contract producing seeds for you, or are all 8 and 9 farms doing breeding, selection, making decisions about which varieties to commercialize and stuff like that? Like, can you tell us how Commonwealth Seeds works?
yeah, so it's actually some of both. And actually, there's going to be 10 this year. We haven't quite updated for the new season yet.
Oh,
but
cool.
yeah, it's definitely often looks like something. So Twin Oaks Seed Farm and the work that I do here it's the home farm and it's the central farm, but there's these other farms that do production as well. So sometimes it does look like me contracting seed growouts out to other farms. But then also there's several of the growers that do their own breeding and trialing and research and then bring those varieties into the mix. So it's both of those approaches.
Oh, cool. Okay. And I imagine that's important because I know some of the varieties that you produce, like the cucurbits come to mind, can get cross-pollinated very easily. So I imagine, is it important to have multiple different farms to do production so that you can have a production, say like one winter squash on one farm and then do a different winter squash on another farm just to make sure there's no cross-pollination?
Yeah, that's definitely one important reason to have many farms involved. And cucurbits are sort of central focus and specialty. That said, we do have several isolations here on the home farm. We've got 4 or 5 cucurbit isolations. We have a couple 3 plots that are in different places, and one of them has a couple fields that are far enough apart. But then, yeah, even with that, I need help from other farms to produce some of the cucurbits.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm having fun hearing about this. I should mention that I'm originally from Virginia, so it's fun for me to hear about what you guys are doing. And also because longtime readers of Growing for Market magazine might know Twin Oaks, because Pam Dowling probably has more bylines in Growing for Market than anybody. I'm sure without checking, she has more bylines than anybody. Pam lives at Twin Oaks, and she for years just wrote articles about vegetable production, and so that's how I'm familiar with Twin Oaks, and I'm curious to hear about the seed work there.
Yeah, Twin Oaks is an intentional community of 100 people. So we have several different businesses. We have a central dining hall and several houses. And I live at Twin Oaks. Part of the time I was working on Commonwealth Seed Growers, I wasn't living here, but I am now. And there is a separate food garden. And then the seed garden is actually on a couple different remote parcels of land. But we do a lot of talking and back and forth with people who manage the food garden, and they use our seeds, and it's definitely a good collaboration.
Yeah, that sounds like that's probably a great place to get feedback from, right? Do you give them varieties that you're thinking might be good varieties, and say, here, grow this, let us know what you think about that and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what are you guys doing on the farm now? So it's mid-December right now. I think the farmers in our audience will know that there's almost always something going on the farm. Feel like other people are like, what do you do in the winter? And so I'm sure there's something going on. What's going on there now?
So we're still getting seeds out of winter squash, pretty busy with that. And then you have to clean them. Winter squash seeds are kind of hard to clean because they don't sink like a lot of seeds. And there's also some like evaluations of winter squash that I'm doing, some selection and breeding, ongoing selection and breeding projects that I'm doing, taste testing winter squash, also doing some sort of last stages of seed cleaning for other crops. So especially winnowing, just winnowed corn and some summer squash yesterday. And then as a seed company, we're also doing germination testing and getting all of our listings ready, getting our print catalog ready. It's a busy time of year.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, let's see, mid-December. Yeah, people are probably, the smart people are ordering their seeds now before things go out of stock. Right. So yeah, I imagine and I hope you are very busy now and in the near future. Okay, so you said you're doing some flavor testing on winter squash right now. So imagining you have a bunch of winter squash that you pulled in. How do you evaluate the flavor on winter squash? Or, I mean, imagine you're not baking a bunch of pumpkin pies. But so if you got a bunch of winter squash that you're thinking about commercializing, how do you taste test it?
Yeah, so it starts with harvest. If we really want to do intensive selection on a breeding population or even on a variety that we're just trying to sort of improve, what we'll do is that we'll train the squash to individual plants and then put each of the harvests from those plants in its own box or, something like that, label them with tape so that we can keep the harvests from each plant separate. So then about this time of year, if we want to do a little bit of keeping quality evaluation, we'll get a chance to do some of that. We get a better keeping quality evaluation if we wait till January, but you get some read on that at this point. And we'll go through and do a keeping quality evaluation. And then just let me back up just a second. When we're doing the harvest, some of the plants will have maybe not great yields, or a couple of them have some kind of raw issue or whatever it is. And those ones we won't store separately. We'll kind of eliminate those at harvest stage. So anyway, it's already whittled down by this time. Then we do the keeping quality evaluation. Often the next step is I'll do a Brix test on the squash, as we're cutting open and getting the seeds out. And that's kind of like an eating quality screen. And you can get a lot of information that way. Sometimes we'll also do a dry matter test. And then the last step is actually getting pieces of squash, putting them on a baking tray and baking them and eating them. Because you can have squash that tests well for Brix and dry matter, but then just have some off flavor. And so it's important to add that into the mix, but you want to whittle it down before you get to that stage.
Okay, that makes sense. So the Brix test is the one where you squeeze out some of the juice from a piece of squash and put it on a refractometer, and you look through it, and it'll tell the Brix, basically a higher number is more sugars in the fluid, which means a higher number is sweeter. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And people may be familiar with that, right? Because people can Brix test, you can buy, I don't know how much it costs, but people can buy a refractometer and test their tomatoes and, different things and see how sweet they are. And what is the dry matter test?
The dry matter, you need a pretty fine scale, but we'll cut about a 15-gram slice of squash and weigh it out, and then put that on a dehydrator tray with a label that says what the weight is. And then we'll dehydrate it completely and then reweigh it. And it's just another way to test the quality of the squash. It sort of corresponds with often sort of nuttiness, or like you could have a squash that people would think of as kind of watery or bland, and often those will have low dry matter test scores.
Okay, so that makes sense. I guess if it's real watery, it would be low on dry matter. So are you looking for the pieces that are the heaviest after being dehydrated, does that correlate? The heavier pieces after being dried correlate to better flavor?
Mhm.
Okay, so do I have this right? That you're using the bricks testing and the dry matter testing to essentially eliminate bad candidates, right? Because there's only so much squash. Like, there's only so many things you can taste, right? So if you can eliminate things that have poor bricks or poor dry matter, that whittles it down so you don't have to taste like 1,000 different squashes. It's basically like predicts which ones are going to be the best tasting, so then you can go and actually do the baking, do the actual taste testing on ones that seem like they're going to have the features that would make them taste good.
Yeah, it whittles it down. I mean, sometimes we'll do the eating quality test on the wider range, but it whittles it down, and it also gives you it's kind of helpful to have the concrete number, because when you end up taste testing so many squashes, it can get confusing. So it's helpful to have these numbers in there also, and then you're just kind of checking the flavor subtleties.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, well, that's good to know, because I realize there's a difficulty of taste testing the vegetables that you can't eat fresh, right? You know, you can't go down the row of winter squash and take a bite. I mean, I guess you could, but it wouldn't, people don't eat much winter squash raw, so that wouldn't be a very good indication. So I was wondering how you did the flavor assessment on those crops that you can't just eat out of hand or out in the field or whatever you want to say. So that's cool.
Another strength of this method is that you can look for plants that are both productive and have good eating quality, because if you're not looking at both, for winter squash in particular, you can end up inadvertently selecting for one or the other.
Okay, you could select one that tastes good but doesn't yield very much, and where it's, of course, you trying to keep both of those numbers high. Okay, all right, cool, that makes sense. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. A well-built high tunnel is one of the smartest investments a small farm can make. It protects your crops, extends your season, and keeps income rolling in even through winter. Nifty Hoops builds complete Gothic high tunnels that are easy to install and built to last. Their easy, bolt-together construction makes setup straightforward and efficient, whether it's a small backyard hoop house or a dozen large production-scale high tunnels. Especially through their community build option, where professional builders work alongside your crew, family, or neighbors to build each structure, usually in a single day. Most growers go with Nifty's full setup: steel-framed end walls, roll-up sides, baseboards, double plastic with inflation, automated vents, and real doors, all priced to make the best choice the easy one. Nifty is a small crew out of Michigan using U.S. steel and working hands-on with growers across the country. They'll help evaluate your site, handle NRCS paperwork, and if they're building with you, they'll even float your cost share until after the build. Visit niftyhoops.com to learn more. Farm more seasons. Grow more food. Nifty Hoops. Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS two-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till, because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing, to making raised beds with the rotary plow, to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying two-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer. And now, back to the show. So I've never been there, but I imagine Commonwealth seed growers operating much like a comparably sized market farm, but with fewer refrigerators and more dehydrators and cooled dry storage. Is that accurate? Is there anything about running a seed company farm that would surprise market farmers?
That is fairly accurate. Sort of the heart of the operation is a dry, cool room where we dry many of the seeds, all of the wet processed seeds. It's actually the box off a refrigerated truck. It's like 8 by 18, and we have dehumidifier and an air conditioner, and we have drying racks and fans, and then we kind of have covered workspace built around that, and that's really the heart of the operation. But in addition, we have several greenhouses where you can dry things like beans and corn, and we have access to a walk-in cooler where we can, for instance, keep the squash while we're in the middle of doing the tests. And we have access to a walk-in freezer where we can freeze things like corn to kill the potential weevils and worms that can get in.
Oh, right.
And then, in other ways, it's, we're growing a lot of the same crops, vegetable crops. And I think some differences are that we tend to do less succession planting, and we don't have to prioritize season extension as much, at least in the seed production. So often that looks like us getting started a little bit later in the spring. But then on the other side of the year, we tend to be busy processing seeds later than a market farm.
Mm-hmm. Right. So into the winter, where a market farm would be harvesting from hoop houses and pulling stuff out of storage, you're probably just processing what you already harvested, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So probably a lot of similarities between a market farm and a seed farm, but some notable differences.
And we don't have to like prepare and pack and market products in the middle of the growing season so much. So that's a difference also.
Oh, right. So that lets you devote the time that you would be going to market to breeding and selection and all that kind of stuff.
But then we get less of a break in the winter.
All right. Well, hey, speaking of breeding and selection, I know one of your goals is to breed varieties that are well suited to your region. Are there things that you do in addition to breeding and selecting in the Southeast that should help develop varieties that are good for the South?
So the main answer I have to this is trialing. So we do a lot of trialing of varieties that come from elsewhere. And that's actually important now with climate change and also with sort of global trade, is that pests and diseases come from other parts of the world where maybe it wasn't here before. And then we have to look for plants and varieties and seed stocks that can handle those pests and diseases. So it's an interesting thing in that we're doing regional seed work, but we have to be looking at seed stocks that come from elsewhere to keep up with the problems and sort of incorporate that into what we're doing. But we can do that by trialing. You just grow a lot of stuff and see what works well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes, I'm very aware that the selection pressures in, say, Virginia or farther south are different than they are, say here in Maine, because we originally started our farm in Pennsylvania, and it's a long story. It was on family land that we lost the use of. And so when we were like, when we knew we had to move on from Pennsylvania, we were like, let's go north, because we know that the pest and disease problems are only going to get worse if we moved back south, considering like spent all my growing up years in Virginia. So I'm like, heat, well, like not so much the heat, but I guess like humidity, more bugs.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, up here we have to deal with winter. Down there, you have to deal with more pests and diseases. So I guess it's like so many things in life, pick your poison. But yeah, I realize there's a whole different set of selection pressures that in the different regions. In fact, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we're always dealing with growing for market, as far as trying to offer good, relevant farm information, is that so few solutions in agriculture are one size fits all. So I feel like so many of the answers are, it depends. It depends on your soil, your climate, the crop you're growing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I see the value of developing regionally adapted varieties. And you guys must be doing a good job. There's actually been a few mentions in the magazine over the years of some people working with your varieties.
Oh, that's great.
Is it the butternut, South Anna, Southwind? You have a butternut?
Yeah, South Anna butternut.
South Anna butternut.
Okay. Is a cucumber that we bred.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm conflating two of your different varieties there. Maybe that's why. Maybe both of those came up. I know the butternut was mentioned. I think we had some growers from Arkansas that said that they really liked your butternut, and they may have mentioned some other varieties in there. So it's it's something. Of course, they just mentioned it in an article. We weren't asking them about varieties. Okay, so on your website, you say that you are trying to develop varieties that exhibit the best pest and disease resistance for your region, as well as great flavor and productivity. How do you breed for improving pest and disease resistance?
The first step is trialing, looking at what's out there. Oftentimes we'll become aware of a problem because we're growing something that isn't working, or we hear something from other people that isn't working that they'd like to see work done on. So yeah, just starting out by trying different stuff. And then, you might find, or, we often do find things that are great at that stage. And then we start producing and offering those varieties. Or maybe we find something that's, varieties that are great, but they could use a little bit more selection and adaptation. So we continue doing active selection with them. And then sometimes it'll be more like, well, here's some different varieties that are good in different ways. So let's cross them together and then start selecting out of that gene pool. And, what that looks like is one season when you make the cross, and then another season where you grow out the cross. And then it's the season after that that you can start doing selection work. And a lot of it looks like you're monitoring things maybe more closely than you would otherwise. For like cucumbers or melons, for instance, we'll train the vines of each plant separately so we can really get a read on how the foliage looks under disease pressure. Our biggest disease pressure for melons and cucumbers would be downy mildew. So we're really looking at that on the foliage, but then we're also measuring the yields and doing taste tests. And it's interesting, actually, with downy mildew, there's two ways to evaluate the disease resistance. One is looking at the foliage, and the other is looking at the productivity, because it often will kill plants so quickly that they just can't produce. Plants that don't have healthy leaves can't produce much fruit.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So actually, during high downy mildew pressure, yields are kind of an important way to evaluate disease resistance. And then you plant this diverse population, and then you're evaluating it plant by plant, and you're picking out and saving seeds from the ones that do the best. And sometimes we're looking at particular diseases like downy mildew or bacterial wilt or anthracnose or gummy stem blight. Sometimes we're just looking at what does the best. So the ones that can handle the squash bugs better are going to do better, even though that's not necessarily what we're focusing on. Over time, selection in the environment has the potential to give us plants that are going to be stronger for specific problems, even if we're not tracking all of those problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about flavor and productivity? Or you don't have to answer this if I already answered that, because I know we talked a little bit about taste testing, but is there anything you want to say about how you improve flavor and productivity in a crop?
Just when you're doing selections, there's a lot to look at, and you just kind of you don't want to just look at flavor because you might miss productivity. And, you're looking at fruit shape. If it's an established variety, you want it to be, what you don't want it to diverge too much from what it already is. And yeah, just remembering to look at all those things to actually, get in there and taste things. Sometimes there'll be a plant in there that's like, wow, this has so many peppers on it. And sometimes it's the plant that has a crazy amount of peppers that is going to have less sweetness in each pepper. So we're not necessarily going to want that plant, but we want a plant that has a lot of peppers, but that also has the flavor and sweetness that we're looking for.
Yeah. All right, that makes sense. Actually, I just thought of something that I'm curious to know if you have observed this. I remember just from talking to some breeders that I've known over the years that they told me that they thought sometimes the most productive varieties were not the best tasting. And one explanation that I've heard from that is just that it takes energy from the plant to produce sugars and dry matter. which you already mentioned. And the explanation I heard for that was just that if it takes the plant's energy to produce those two things. And so the theory that I've heard was that some plants that don't produce very much sweetness or dry matter can essentially just like put out more output of weight, but it's almost like, big watery fruits. It's kind of like a thing in tomatoes. Like, in fact, you can even try and improve tomato production by picking right after watering, but it's going to give you more watery fruits. And so I was curious, have you seen any kind of correlation, like the best tasting fruits? I guess it's a discorrelation. Have you seen a discorrelation between the best tasting fruits and the most productive fruits? Or is that just what you're trying to tease out? You're trying to find the varieties that are high in both, that taste really good and are productive.
Yeah, I think there is a natural tendency towards an inverse correlation on that with many crops. Maybe I've thought about it the most with winter squash, because you can have a butternut that has like a not very good quality butternut that has 8% dry matter.
Yeah.
And then you can have butternut that has 16% dry matter. And there's literally twice as much food in the higher dry matter butternut. And so, yeah, the plant is having to work twice as hard to make that fruit. So, I think teasing out the plants that give you both disease resistance is an important piece of it, because you want really healthy plants to be able to get the sunlight and make it into vegetables. And then with winter squash, like, I want to breed stuff that tastes really good, but I don't want to get up to 20% dry matter and it's going to impact yields too much. So
Yeah. Okay, well that makes sense. And also because I feel like I've noticed over the years that the most productive varieties are frequently not also the best tasting ones. So that might shed a little bit of light on that.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I really want to do both, but there is some inverse relationship there.
Yeah. I mean, especially for market farmers, right? Because I figure with market farming, especially if you're selling, say, at a farmer's market, even if you're wholesaling, like if you're wholesaling to a local grocery store and people like tell the grocery store that they don't like your butternuts or whatever, the grocery store isn't going to want to keep carrying your produce. And even more for if you're standing behind your table selling your produce at a farmer's market, right? It's like people don't care. Eaters don't care how much yield you got. They just care whether the piece of produce that you sold them tastes good or not. And so obviously they're not going to come back to your stand if your produce doesn't taste great. But obviously farmers are paid by weight. So yeah, there's got to be some kind of happy medium. Tasting good, but being productive enough to make profit.
Sometimes you can get varieties that become known by customers and that they ask for because they do taste so good. That's an aspiration as a plant breeder, is to create some of those varieties that people ask for, especially, like honey nut butternut is one of those. And I hope that South Anna butternut is becoming one of those.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of types, there's a listing in your catalog that I don't see a lot of places. Tropical pumpkin. What is that?
So what we think of as winter squash is grown all over the world. A lot of it is actually grown in tropical areas. And so when you're in a place that doesn't have winter, it doesn't make sense to call it winter squash. So it's called tropical pumpkin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And there are some interesting varieties on there that are certainly look different. There's one with green flesh that you have. So those look really interesting. I might try some of those this coming year for our little garden. Just give them a whirl. People should check it out. There's some interesting varieties that I'm really just not familiar with the types on there.
We found with winter squash / tropical pumpkins that we really need some of the southern. We've sourced a lot of seed stocks from tropical regions and from south of here to be able to handle the diseases that we have. Typically, northern varieties don't do that. The foliage diseases will take them down. So that we have a lot of tropical varieties, or even our butternuts have tropical varieties crossed into them.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense. So in that case, are you ending up with say, a butternut that just looks like a butternut, but maybe it's gotten some of the disease resistance or something from a tropical pumpkin?
Yeah.
Is that kind of thing? Okay, cool. Right. Yeah. Because I don't know. I think if people haven't done much breeding, maybe they haven't thought about that. But breeding is a biological thing, right? You can't just go off the shelf and be like, oh, I'd really like to have resistance for downy mildew or whatever. Like, you've got to get that resistance from some variety that exists. And so that's pretty cool to me that you're finding, I don't know how to say it, but like genetics that'll work in the South from other hot, humid places.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. Another thing that stood out in the listings of your seed catalog is your sweet corn using the brittle gene instead of the more common is SE sugary enhanced gene. If I know I got that, we were talking about this and I got that wrong. So I just want can you explain to us what this is, the brittle gene, and why you use the brittle gene instead of the SE gene for sweet corn?
Yeah, so the most common sweet corns grown these days are sugary enhanced SE gene or super sweet, which is SH2 gene. And we're introducing two sweet corn seed stocks this year that were bred at the University of Hawaii by Dr. James Brubaker. And he was doing sweet corn breeding for something like 60 years, several generations a year, just like did an immense amount of work. A lot of it was crossing existing sweet corns to tropical field corns and then selecting for the sweet kernels and genes. And this brittle gene is another sweet gene that makes the sweet corn taste sweet. And Dr. Brubaker preferred it because it allowed for better soil emergence in the context of, I believe, in the context of high fusarium pressure that would impact the emerging seedlings. And he just found that it worked better in their conditions. And so that's what he did a lot of his work with. And I'm really excited about these corn varieties. So I got seed stock from Jay Boss, who does some growing with Commonwealth seed growers also, but he used to study with James Brubaker in Hawaii and saved and maintained some of those seed stocks and brought them back to North Carolina where he lives now. And then the last couple of years I have done trials with several of those Hawaiian seed stocks, and these are the two varieties that I like the most. And they're somewhat more variable than you'd find from a hybrid variety, but they're just it's like field corn plants with sweet corn ears. And I just, as a seed grower, I know this isn't what a market grower might be thinking of, but the ears are a lot more resistant to molds and rots that can like impact the kernels as you're drying them down to seed stage. So that's really nice for us. And they have earworm resistance.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I'm not saying 100% earworm resistance, but yeah, they've just lodging resistance. I'm really excited to be working with these seed stocks and to continue selecting them from here.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that makes sense because I feel like a lot of the sweet corn that I've grown has been kind of wimpy plants.
Yeah.
So I think I can see how that might be an advantage to have a big, strong plant. And I know, like on the fusarium tip, like I know up here, people are always trying to plant sweet corn as early as possible. And so the cold soil emergence is a really big deal, but I can see how I imagine there's more and more fusarium pressure the farther south you go. And so I can see how in the South, it's not so much cold soil emergence. Although I'm sure people try to push the envelope and have the earliest. It's like whatever your climate is, somebody's trying to get the earliest sweet corn there. But I can see how having more fusarium resistance would be an important thing the farther south you go. So that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and they have resistance to rust and other diseases that we're not necessarily seeing all those diseases here. But I am looking at the plants; they have like a level of resilience that is really remarkable. And a grower from Florida tried one of them and it did way better than the other variety they tried.
Oh, cool. Do you know why it's called the brittle gene?
I don't know.
Okay. I know sometimes certain traits just like get a name based on where they were, it can be almost random. Like they'll name certain traits based on like where it was discovered or something like that. So I don't know. I feel like that was talking about the actual genetics is pretty granular, but I also think that if people have grown sweet corn, they're used to seeing those little, SE, SH2, like I forget, all the different types, right? Because isn't one of the, oh, I'm glad I thought of this because I wanted to ask. I know most sweet corns, you don't want them to cross with another type of sweet corn, or it messes up the fresh eating quality of the end product. And is it same thing with the brittle gene? Is it you want the plants with the brittle gene not to get crossed with other types of sweet corn, like with regular sweet corn? Like basically the thing people are used to doing if they're used to growing sweet corn is isolating varieties.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah. Okay, I would think so. So yeah, that was kind of, we don't get down to talking about the genetics of things that often. On the other hand, I think our audience is kind of nerdy and like wants to know why, the details about these things that they're growing. So,
and the BT gene, it is also called super sweet because it has that ability to, it's really sweet and it holds on, the ears stay sweet a lot longer. So it is similar to the regular super sweet gene in that way.
The brittle gene is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Because I get my types mixed up, and I think that would be a whole nother podcast episode. We can do another podcast episode, talk all about the different sweet corn varieties.
That sounds good.
Actually, we have, it's probably like, that would be a whole nother podcast. Actually, we have an article about sweet corn coming in the January magazine. I should get the author on here and talk about types. That would be an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm interested to see it.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this a little bit already, but so actually, I should say one of the reasons it occurred to me to call you up is because you wrote a really nice email a few weeks ago. I don't know, it's kind of like a season roundup email that I got. I guess I'm on your email list, and I thought it was really interesting. You're talking about, I think, the corn, and you were very detailed in the email about some of the practices that you were using, which I thought was really interesting, just as someone who's interested in how these things come about. To give people a peek into the breeding process, can you tell us about the vine tracing technique that you mentioned you were using on some of your winter squash? And I guess my question is, can you explain how it works? And also, are you doing vine tracing on winter squash because of the way that the plants grow together so much that it can be hard to tell? If you just leave them in the field, it's not always obvious which fruits went to which plants. So I guess it's a two-part question. Is that why you're using vine tracing? Because it's not always obvious which fruits came from which plants? And how are you using that particular technique in winter squash?
Yeah, so winter squash, the plants tend to entwine, very much. And our varieties tend to be pretty large vines, vigorous varieties. So, you can get fruits that are 20 plus feet away from the base of the plant. And like I was talking about earlier, in order to select for the plants that have a good combination of productivity and flavor, you need to be able to know which fruits came from which plant and then go in and pick that plant. If you're just looking at fruits by themselves, you're really working with incomplete information. So to do that, we have to be able to match the fruits with the plant. So we actually, we go out there, you clip a fruit, and we'll put a flag there so we remember what fruit we clipped. Then you actually follow the vine all the way back to the base of that plant. Put another flag there so you don't forget which plant base that you're working with. Then you go get the fruit and bring it back and put it at the base of the plant. And so we don't do all our winter squash this way, but we do anything that we're trying to do intensive selection with. We'll do this. And, most of what we sell of this has been done at some point. I mean, actually this year, I think we did this with 4 varieties here this year. So we do a good bit of it. And then what else? If you have multiple people working in the field, everyone has different colored flags. It's a lot of work. Another thing that's good is that if you have 2 rows, you want to keep those rows separate during the growing season, just sort of move the vines. So that makes it a little easier to do if you don't have multiple rows growing into each other. And one thing we'll do also, let's say with South Anna, we sell a good bit of seed of South Anna. So we'll have one row that we do all the intensive ongoing selection and vine tracing and flavor testing on. And then we'll have, like this year we had five rows, I think, of ones that we weren't doing that on. But
Mm-hmm.
next year's production will get the benefit of this year's selection. There's a video about it, about the vine tracing on our website. It's just a really powerful tool to select winter squash, and I want to encourage people to do it.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, yeah, people should check that out then. What's your website is commonwealthseedgrowers.com. What's your website?
It's commonwealthseeds.com.
commonwealthseeds.com. Okay, cool. So people can go there, check that out if they want to see that process.
It's in a blog post if you click on the blog in the menu.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when it comes time to actually do the seed production for the seed that you're going to sell in a given year, let's say you're doing your butternut. Do you have a field or a row that you plant the seed that is your finished variety and just let it self-pollinate, let the birds and the bees do it? Or are you doing hand pollinations for the seed that you're going to be selling?
Usually for like the bulk seed that we're selling, we're insect pollinated. We do sell some seed that's sort of more in development, and we let people know that. We actually sell things that we call research samples, and sometimes those will be hand pollinated, and we'll just have a packet size available of those for people to sort of try out and check out the process as it's going. But for the more established varieties, they're insect pollinated, open pollinated, and we'll have larger sizes.
Okay. And so, that sounds interesting to me to get I forget what you called it, the breeder seed or still experimental seed, because I imagine that seed is if you're selling it, you probably are 1 or 2 generations away from thinking that you have a variety that you're going to release. So is that a way for people to get a sneak peek? And like, is it for them to get a sneak peek and for you to get some early feedback on a variety? Both, probably?
Yeah, I think it's both of those things, and for people to sort of know what's coming down the pipeline for new varieties, and for us to sort of share about what we're actively working on. In the past, I think that sometimes I may have released varieties earlier than would have been ideal. So I'm kind of trying to do less of that, but instead, sell things that I want to talk about the process. I'm selling those as research samples.
Yeah. So typically those pre-commercial varieties, do they have just a little bit more variability? Or like you sell people like, we're selling this, but it may have, like 10% off types or something like that? Or like, how do you approach the sneak peeks?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for each one, but yeah, they're likely to have off types, and we'll say, we'll give people the full rundown of what to expect and where the project is at. Yeah, some of them there's a melon that we're still calling a research sample, but it's like, I'm pretty sure we're going to name it next year. So, but then there's things that do have more off types, or there's more of a work in progress. And we're actually going to have a couple of varieties this year that we're going to sell as diversity mixes, because they're really closer to the early stages of the process. And we think that people could take those, and they have a broad base that people could select for their conditions, starting with those.
Oh, right. Okay. So they'll have more variability than your average variety. Yeah. So people well, that's cool that you're encouraging people to do their own breeding work and, say like, I guess there's a range in this seed packet. You can pick your favorite and run with it if you want to.
Yeah, we're only doing 2 things that we're calling diversity mixes this year. And one of them is an orange flint corn from J. Boss, actually. And it has orange flint corn from all up and down North and South America and the Caribbean, all mixed together. And it's just an opportunity for people to start selection projects. And, potentially as we keep selecting it, or as Jay keeps selecting it, he'll come up with named varieties out of it. But this year it's this opportunity for people to look at something that's more diverse.
Okay, I see. So it has a lot of more genetic variation in it, which would form the basis, would be a good starting place for people to make their own variety.
Yeah.
So you could call that, just keep selling that mixed up orange sweet corn, call it choose your own adventure. Choose
Right.
your own adventure, dent
Right.
corn.
Yeah. Except we're calling it a diversity mix. Let's see. Cateto. I don't know how to pronounce it. Cateto or Cateto and Cousins Orange Flint diversity mix.
Beautiful. Okay. Actually, that kind of is a good segue into the next thing that I wanted to ask you about, which is dehybridization. So I don't know if you just released it or it's been out for a while. I noticed that you have a dehybridized version of Carmen, the sweet pepper that a lot of people know has been popular for years from Johnny's, with your dehybridized version called Scarlet Begonias. Partially, I ask because I know a lot of growers who may not even be breeders have tried dehybridization when a favorite, let's say a favorite hybrid variety goes away, or maybe they just want to make an open pollinated version of a favorite variety. So, can you tell us what dehybridization is, and to give us a real life example, how did you approach it with Scarlet Begonias? Or you can choose a different variety if there's a better example of dehybridization. But can you explain dehybridization to us?
Yeah. So I'll go over just a little bit about like what the difference between a hybrid and an open pollinated variety is.
Yeah, that'd be great.
With a hybrid, the way the seed is produced is you have two parents that are crossed together each time you want to make seed of that variety. So for Carmen, that every time they make seed of Carmen, they've got two kinds of peppers planted and they're making that cross maybe by hand. I'm not actually sure what the methodology is. And so with hybrid seed, with open pollinated seed, you can save the seeds and plant them and they'll be the same thing the next year. But with a hybrid seed, if you save seed from Carmen F1 and then plant that, you'll get something that is much more diverse, that reflects traits of both parents and everything in between and some other stuff. So that's what we did with Carmen. And it was diverse. There were different shapes and yeah, I'm kind of not fully remembering right now, but we ended up I'm not remembering the first year exactly what it looked like, but I remember some of them are round. Some of them are very long and skinny. Some of them look like Carmen and different flavors, different sweetnesses and flavors and everything. So Carmen was actually we planted out, it was some market grower friends of ours saved the seed and we planted that out, started selecting, and it definitely didn't seem straightforward. So we've been we selected it for 5 years, and looking at the productivity and the eating quality from each plant every year that we would do it. And some years we did a really thorough job of tracking that, keeping notes on flags that are at the plant. And some years we did not quite as thorough of a job, and then in 2024, I think we really hit it with we just found a great plant. It was in a really rough part of the field that wasn't getting enough water and they didn't look good. And there was this one plant that looked pretty good. And so we planted that out this year and it just looked great and tasted great and was productive, and the peppers hold on the plants and stuff like that. So, but yeah, with dehybridization, sometimes it's actually easier. Sometimes you'll plant something that is labeled as a hybrid, you'll save seed and you'll plant it and you won't see any variation at all.
Yeah.
And it might be that they were just marketing it as a hybrid, but it wasn't really a hybrid. And then sometimes you'll see very little variation because the parents were actually very close together. Like it is a hybrid, but the parents are very similar. And so there's kind of a range of possibilities of what can happen. And the word dehybridization I use it, but it's kind of a misnomer because you start working with these populations and you end up with things that you didn't expect that you think are good. And so you end up with something new rather than just a dehybridized version of the hybrid.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. And I'll say I use the term dehybridization. It's not, I don't think you describe it as that in your seed catalog. So just to be clear for people.
I do use it, but I think I try to not use it, or I try to use it less, but.
Yeah. I can just think of specific varieties that I know people have been trying to dehybridize. Like copra onion comes to mind. Like it's an onion. People like a really just. I think the thing that stood about copra is that it's stored really well. Could be wrong, but I think like we'd grown that one. So I know copra is one that was like a favorite of people for many years that people were trying to dehybridize. Like so the seed company that produced it, that variety went away, and I think people who still had copra seeds, some of them started a dehybridization project. And I think there's it's like buffalo, the greenhouse tomato. I'm just thinking of like of ones.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the ones that come to mind are ones that I know people liked, and so then the seed company drops it, or they stop producing the seed, and people say like haven't found anything better, and so people are like, "Ooh, I'm going to develop a dehybridized variety of buffalo or copra or whatever." And so I think that's really good of you to point out it's a whole new variety, but we, like what they're talking about is they're trying to get that same old copra, buffalo, Carmen, whatever that is not available anymore. They just want an open pollinated version. And so I think I'm glad you pointed that out. It's not, you're creating a whole new open pollinated variety that I think when people use that language, they mean like they want it to look like the copra that they remember, but they want to be able to produce their own seed since the seed company stopped making it.
And often you get into this and, maybe you get something that looks like the parent, but then you find something else interesting and you get 2 or 3 varieties out of the mix. This also brings up something else, which is that there not being a lot of resilience in the hybrid seed model, to where like there's a centralized company that bred it or that sells it, and they could decide to pull it for whatever reason, and then something your farm has relied on, you don't have it anymore. So it's just a something to think about in terms of why doing regional open pollinated seed work is important and useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard people say that to develop a true breeding open pollinated variety out of a hybrid, people ballpark it at like 7 years. And I think you said that you worked on scarlet begonias for 5 or 6 years or something like that. So there's variability there. It's not like 7's a magic number. Like I'm just thinking, like, if people are listening to this podcast and want to try a dehybridization project, or if they make their own cross, let's say, and they're wondering how many years they have to stabilize it before it's going to be a stable variety. And what I mean by that is, if you do cross 2 dissimilar crops, like maybe you cross a yellow cherry tomato to a red cherry tomato, and you really want an orange cherry tomato. So you mentioned F1, which is what hybrids are, which I think is first filial. That's what F1 is, first filial, meaning like the first year after you make a cross. Pretty much all the hybrids that you see in seed catalogs are F1 hybrids. They're the year after the cross. And then if you grow out successive generations, like let's take that example where you took a yellow cherry tomato, bred it with a red cherry tomato, you cross the 2, the F1, let's say you found a cross where the F1 generation is orange, but then if you grow out those seeds, that would be the F2 generation, the second filial generation, and that's where you might start seeing some red cherry tomatoes from the one parent, some yellow cherry tomatoes from the other parent, some orange cherry tomatoes, and then you'll have all this variability in those successive generations. Yeah. I just want, am I correct? Like, it's not like a magic number, like, oh, just select the ones you want for 7 years, and after 7 years you get a new variety. Is it like you're saying some varieties have less variability? You might be able to go from the cross, the hybridization, to a stable variety in less than 7 generations. And then on the other hand, there might be some varieties that have a lot of genetic variation in there where you actually need to select and stabilize for more than 7 generations before you get a uniform variety again.
Yeah, it definitely varies. Like the South Anna butternut variety, we named it 6+ years ago, but we're still selecting it and have really improved it a lot in the last 5 years. Like, maybe we shouldn't have named it so early, and that was a pretty wide cross. It was Seminole pumpkin with Waltham butternut, and it, just getting that stabilized and getting the best stuff, in there. That project started the first cross was 2011 or 2012. So that's an example of one that, I'm still doing useful selections 12 years later. But then again, the variety was already a useful variety, 5 or 6 years ago. There's this hybrid okra called Annie Oakley that we sell. And I set out to dehybridize that and I saw no variation at all. So it was just like, okay, done.
Okay. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand acts as your business coach and assistant, helping you sell out, save time, and grow smarter. From marketing to fulfillment to customer support, Farmhand pulls real data from what's worked and what hasn't for other farms and turns it into websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that give you your time back. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/GFM and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/GFM. This episode is brought to you by Tend, the all-in-one AI-powered farm management platform trusted by modern growers. Whether you're growing vegetables, flowers, or fruit, or managing a nursery, greenhouse, or vineyard, you know how much time gets lost in planning, tracking, and staying organized. Tend helps you cut through the busy work so you can focus on growing and selling what matters. With Tend, you can plan your crops, assign and track tasks, manage inventory, and handle your sales and accounting all in one smart, easy-to-use platform. Whether you run a 1-acre farm or manage a large operation, Tend adapts to your scale and style, supporting everything from manual labor to fully mechanized workflows. Try it for free at tend.com. No credit card required. That's TEND.com. Streamline your season and grow with confidence. And now, back to the show. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still having to do, I forget what it's called, but like maintenance work on these varieties? Because even though, let's say, South Anna is your butternut is an open pollinated variety, genetics is variable, right? So there's in any given, there can be mutations and just I guess just differences in the way genes recombine. Maybe you have a better way to say that, but it's not like you bred the variety and you're done. Like, you're like, because if you think about it, you have to keep doing production to have South Anna seed to sell every year. You have to keep doing new productions of South Anna. Do you have to do selection work to make sure that the variety stays the way that you want it to be? Like I don't know, is there like variety maintenance? I don't know what to call it. Is there a word for that? Right? Because you're not just like, okay, we're done, right? Like, you're still doing selection work on the butternut, just even if you're happy with it, to make sure that it doesn't drift. Like, there's not genetic variation over time that like makes it get smaller or bigger or whatever. Disease resistance stays good. Is there a word for that? I mean, am I correct that you're having to continue to do selection work even on varieties that are finished? And is there a name for that?
Yeah, I would call it selection or stewardship, variety stewardship. Any open pollinated variety, like, they all need this in an ongoing way. And if you're not doing it, then it's going to keep doing it itself, and it might not be in ways that you want. So whenever you're saving seed, especially like in an ongoing way, if you're stewarding a variety, you have to really think about how you're selecting it and why. And maybe there's some things that you want to improve, but maybe you want to be careful about that it's good to kind of get to know a variety before you try to select it too hard. And there's another couple concepts on this. There's roguing, which is when you're doing seed production and you take out plants that don't look good, or maybe they just have, they die early or whatever it is. And then there's something called like stock seed selection, which means that you're like, maybe you're saving seeds off of 90% of the plants, but then you're also doing sort of like a special grade of seed selection that you're calling stock seed. And next time you produce that variety, you're going to use that. So over time, it'll continue to improve for your conditions, or at least be maintained for your conditions. But there's a lot to it. The breeding work of new varieties is really interesting stuff, but also, a lot of what we do is just maintain good existing varieties.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what I wanted to get handle on. Yeah, that like even when a variety is finished,
Right.
you still have to keep, it's not truly finished. Like that I thought that was probably the case, that you have to continue doing work basically to keep that variety to be as good as you originally bred it to be. So and so as far as roguing, is that the kind of thing, do you walk through the production like when you're doing a big a production of let's say South Anna butternut? Does that mean you just walk through the field and like cut out any plants that don't look as good as they should? How does that go for you?
I want to maybe use a different plant type because we've talked so much about winter squash. But
Yeah.
let's say with sweet corn, maybe something that has like less good like tip fill, or less good, the leaves don't cover the end of the ear all the way or something like that. And then you're not going to include those in the seed that you move forward with.
Okay, so that's something you can visually identify in the field when you're doing the production.
Mm-hmm.
So you say like, oh, I can see the tip of that ear sticking out from the wrapper leaves. Like, obviously, don't want those genetics to go into the final batch and get rid of that plant. So
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay, cool. I realize there's a lot of work that goes into both developing and maintaining these varieties, and so I just wanted to peek behind the curtain and see, like how you guys do that.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah. Can you tell us about a few varieties that you're excited about releasing for 2025?
So yeah, I mentioned the orange plant already. We're releasing this year, and the scarlet begonias pepper. Some others we're releasing something that we're calling Virginia Moon and Stars, and so there's a yellow Moon and Stars variety. It's yellow fleshed Moon and Stars watermelon, and this is a Georgia heirloom. And so what we found is that it has better southern adaptation than the red Moon and Stars, and just it's kind of sweeter and does better. And then the Virginia Red Moon and Stars is a red selection that we pulled out of the yellow variety that just showed up. And yeah, I'm excited to put that out there. Tastes really good, grows good. It actually gives about 15 or 20% orange fleshed Moon and Stars melon, which we're kind of inclined to keep in there because it's interesting. Like, I don't want yellow in there, but the red and the orange is pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm excited about the Hawaiian corns that we'll be putting out there this year. There's a gourd seed corn that a grower that we've started working with developed over, by doing selection over 10 or 12 years. Ozark gourd seed.
Gourd seed is that corn. It's almost like has a little, each individual kernel has its own kind of like has its own little wrapper. What is gourd seed corn?
Gourd seed corn. So this is like a dry corn that you use for cornmeal or grits or tortillas or something. It's called gourd seed because when you shell it, the seeds look kind of like the seeds of gourds. And it also shells really easily. But we trialed it and it just had like really big, nice looking ears, and excited about that.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever grown one of those gourd seed corns, but I've seen them before, so that could be something interesting if people have never tried that before.
Yeah, there's another sweet pepper I'm excited about from a farmer breeder in North Carolina named Doug Jones. It's just like it's kind of an elongated red bell pepper that we're calling Red Reliance. So yeah, I'm just excited to be working with some new farmer breeders on this project.
Yeah, that's the really cool thing about the like collaborative nature of your projects, that you can be pulling in all these influences and I assume getting input from all your different locations of how well the varieties do in different locations. I'm sure that's valuable for your making selections. Are there any future projects that aren't quite out yet, but that you want to tease us about, that you're working on, that you're excited about, that you can tell us to keep an eye out for in the future? Like anything you're like, wish you could release it this year, but it's not quite done yet?
Yeah, okay. There's several things. I think I'm going to talk about summer squash. So we've been working with winter squash for years and years, but summer squash, we kind of just started working on. I think this was the third growing season of like really trying to explore summer squash. So the big thing with the summer squash is looking for varieties that are resistant to vine borers. And what that often means is, okay, there's different species of squash, and most summer squash are Cucurbita pepo. But there's some summer squashes that are Cucurbita machata, which is the species that butternut is in, and they tend to be more vining. They also tend to do better in warmer parts of the world. Most tropical pumpkins are machatas, and they're also vine borer resistant.
Oh, yeah.
Just as a species, they just almost entirely don't get vine borers. And so there's Machada summer squashes from both Korea and Brazil that we've tried, and we're dehybridizing two of the Korean varieties. And so that should be, we actually have a research sample of one of those this year, but one of them is stabilizing pretty quickly. I think it'll be finished in a year or two. And then we've also crossed together the Brazilian and the Korean Machada summer squashes. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, vine borers, if people have them, and I think most parts of North America do get vine borers, so probably a lot of people know what those are. Yeah, they can be really a problem when they're bad. Well, that's really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of a machada summer squash. So are they, I mean, I want to say all the machadas, like butternuts that I'm familiar with, are vining plants, and most of the summer squash plants are more of a bush plant. Are these machada summer squashes that you've got, are they bushes, or do they vine out?
They're vining. Yeah.
Okay.
They're a little bit shorter vining than your typical machada, but they're still vining. And actually, over time, the vines can become pretty big.
I don't think that's a deal breaker. It's just I think if people have vine borers, they would grow whatever will resist them.
We want ones that will set a lot of fruit, early and look something like a regular summer squash.
That was my other question. Are they like zucchinis? Are they like, do they look like a cylindrical summer squash, or what do these, the Brazilian and Korean machada summer squashes look like?
The Korean ones, they're cylindrical and they could kind of pass for a zucchini. I mean, they're nice looking. Yeah, they're cylindrical, they're green, a little bit different look, but people could, I think, see it and be like, oh, that's like pretty much a zucchini. The Brazilian ones, they look a little bit more like a really elongated butternut at one of them, and the other one looks kind of like more like a regular butternut, but with green and white stripes.
Sounds interesting. I mean, I think if you can grow them and they taste good,
and they taste very good.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know people buy with their eyes. I know people like stuff that looks like what they're used to buying. At the same time, I mean, it's like it's not like people have never seen, or a lot of people have seen a striped summer squash before. There's the name is escaping. What's the Italian one? The ribbed Italian one.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. What? Yeah. I think if people can grow it and it tastes good, it's like people like. I feel like people like buying things that they know what are familiar with, and on the other hand, people are also sometimes like novelty. So I bet if it tastes good and people can grow it, they could probably develop a market for it. All right, well, that's really the end of the questions that I had thought of for you, but I wanted to make sure and ask you if there's anything else I should have asked you or that you'd like to say before we let you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about sort of like bigger picture why doing seed work is important. And I really would love to see more market growers getting involved in seed work. You can, pick one or two or a few varieties and steward them on your farm and have like positive practical results from doing that. And another piece is just learning about seeds and seed systems and selection can allow you to make better, more informed choices about seeds and how to navigate like the same variety name, but sometimes you'll have the same variety name, but it's being stewarded differently. And so it's important to know like stewardship history and sourcing information. And so just sort of taking some time to learn about and care about seeds and seed sourcing and do some of that work, I think has potential to be helpful for market growers directly. But then even more than that, it has potential to improve our resilience. And I mentioned that earlier about hybrids. They're produced in a centralized way and they can disappear, and then everybody's left without that variety that they relied on. So if we're doing seed work in a more decentralized way and a more diverse way, then we have better resilience in case the company drops a variety or in case there's some other supply chain problem. And, we saw some supply chain problems in 2020. So yeah, just to get involved, to think about seed sourcing, to think about regional seed work, and to think about and ask about where the seed was produced and stewarded that you're growing. And I think that will help regional people be able to do regional seed work and to make that a viable income and viable project.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true. And I think the way that you're doing it with, as far as selecting where you are and putting the grower name on the packet and all that kind of stuff, I think that's a great idea, just to make people think about where their seeds came from. And I think that's a great thing because, I mean, particularly the selection, because I know it's so different. The pest and disease pressure is so different if you're growing in Florida versus Oregon or something like that, that I think it's really important what you're doing as far as selecting, varieties that are going to do well in that region, because there's so few one size fits all solutions in agriculture. I'm glad to see that you're selecting with your region in mind. I think it's a great service to growers in the South. I mean, I'm assuming that's what you would say. Like, I know you can grow your varieties anywhere, but would you say it's South or Southeast? How do you where you're breeding for?
So we're in Virginia. We're in the northern part of the South, and we're on the edge of the South and the Mid-Atlantic, and I think that the work we're doing has relevance up into New England, especially, say, with cucurbit downy mildew resistance. And so sometimes we will say, use the region name of the South or the Mid-Atlantic, but often I just want to tell people where they were grown and what we're looking for, and let people make their own determinations about whether it might be useful to them.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. And it's definitely important work to do. I'll tell you a quick story you might find interesting. So I can't remember if I mentioned during the interview, but I used to work for Johnny's Seeds, who a lot of people know as a seed supplier, doing trials on specific crops. And so for a while I worked on lettuce. It was never like one crop, but lettuce was one of my crops for a while. And so there were some the old standard open pollinated varieties, like let's say black seeded Simpson or something like that, like a good old OP that people are probably familiar with. Well, you're aware there's a number of different places where you can buy black seeded Simpson, right? Like a lot of those standard open pollinated varieties may have multiple different people producing them. And so one of my jobs was to trial multiple versions, different seed companies' versions of black seeded Simpson, to identify the best strain, because it was really noticeable who was doing their roguing, like you mentioned, and selection work. Because I think it was very different. Some, let's say black seeded Simpson or whatever variety, some of them were very very uniform. You could tell the strain had been maintained very well, and then some of them had a lot of off types, weren't very consistent, difference in size and color and all that kind of stuff. And so actually what one of the things I did was I would trial multiple different companies' versions of the same open pollinated crop, so we could essentially determine supplier of preference. We could see who was doing a good job maintaining those open pollinated strains and who was just planting a big field of them, not doing any roguing, and those productions were slipping. They seemed to be going downhill over time. And so I realized that's one of the ways I realized it takes a lot of work to keep the open pollinated varieties looking really good. So thank you. I'm glad you're doing it.
That's a good story. I think about that kind of stuff a lot.
I wonder, I wouldn't be surprised if you guys, I imagine if you're going to do work on an old open pollinated variety, you might do the same thing. Look at a few different strains, see who has the best strain, and then start from the best strain.
Yeah, we do that sometimes, but it's our thing to be producing all the seeds ourselves. So then we'll take that and then start, as a starting point for doing our own productions.
All right, Edmund. Well, where can people find Commonwealth, either online or social media, or wherever you want people to look you up?
Probably our website is the best place, commonwealthseeds.com. We are also somewhat active on Instagram, but the website is probably the best place. We also have a print catalog. You can get on the website and sign up to get one.
Okay, so here we are, mid-December, end of 2025. Has your print catalog gone out for 2026 yet, or is it?
No, we're not quite done. It should be in the mail early January.
Cool. All right. Well, this podcast is going to be out before that. So if people hear about this, they can go to your website, request a print catalog, and get one hot off the presses in January.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Edmund, for telling us about Commonwealth Seeds. I thought it was interesting, and I really appreciated the discussion, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing to make good varieties for the growers. So thanks for your time, and thanks for the good work.
I really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, it's good to get a chance to talk through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Edmund. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never even get billed. All subscriptions get you a year of the magazine, plus 150 downloadable back issues from the last 15 years and over 1,700 archived articles. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 a year, head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.